a couple of questions we actually wanted to ask was why do American adults think the way they do? So I think it's because of secularization. So what do I mean by that? There was a lot of cultural Christianity up until like the 20th century, where cultural Christianity kind of went out of popularity, especially in the mid 50s or 60s, during the 60s, when things kind of, people stopped being God-centered. They just kind of did their own thing. You know, people started kind of leaving churches, and Christianity was not. I think the freedom to believe anything you want to allowed people to kind of leave the church if they weren't serious Christians. There's a positive side to that. Don't get me wrong, because when you force everybody to go to church,
it's not real. Like,
that doesn't make everybody Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's not the cultural religion anymore, people start to think more in a more secular way, or they are no longer guided by Christian principles. So, they don't think about objective truth. They're not guided by the beliefs that were often instilled in people when Christianity was cultural. Don't get me wrong. Again, there were negatives to cultural Christianity, and that's not what I want to bring back. That's not what we want to bring back. That's not something that I think is positive, because like right now, especially, I'm reading about the time, Charlemagne and Pope Leo, and it was the fight between, who's in charge of religion. Was the king in charge of religion or the Pope in charge of religion? And they had to fight it out, kind of the politics of it all. Could you imagine if our politics had religion mixed into it today?
I mean, I will say you do see a little bit of it. And
you do, yeah.
And it's like, it's very cringy, I guess.
Yes, but imagine Donald Trump and a pastor deciding who's more in charge of the church, Trump or the pastors.
Imagine Trump being in charge of the church, period.
Yes.
Or whoever, any president really. Like if the world is secular enough that you don't really want to mix the church into it.
You don't want it's a check and balance of powers there. Like the church has its heads and officials, it's people who are in charge, the elders of the churches. And then the world, the secular side of things has their own leaders, and that's the government. And in reality, the government is not supposed to be above the churches. They're kind of equals. But
I think
today it's definitely that the government is way stronger than the churches. Yeah. But the negative side of not having Christianity as the culture, part of the culture, is it denigrates a lot of the thinking. We can see it today, kind of in how people act and think, and you ask them anything about God, and this is what most people think. Most people think that, sin doesn't deserve damnation. They don't think going to church is necessary, and they think truth is relative.